topic for this month is anatomy of an accessible form. Um, we actually had this idea uh, to to present this when one of our founding members, Kat, who is not present right now, but she had a presentation for SoftCon, and she asked us for some samples of things that we can demo to the audience about inaccessible forms and accessible forms. And we thought that it would also be interesting to share this with our community because SoftCon was a paid event. So we thought of presenting this year as well, and we have I think we have more time allowance than what Kat had um, for SoftCon. So hopefully, if you have more questions, we can answer them. We'll have more time to answer them later. And of course, with me is Rhea. I'll let her introduce herself. My name is Gerson Lakdao. I'm a web developer slash WordPress developer. I've been freelancing for, I think, the past 12, 15 years. And I only got into web accessibility, I think, for the past 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. And I couldn't find any related community here in the Philippines. So I thought of starting this community, Web Accessibility Philippines. And I'm so happy that a lot of people are also interested and they also support the advocacy. Um, we have people like Rhea, who's a really great resource for web accessibility and practical knowledge about accessibility in general. Um, so I'll let Rhea introduce herself.
Hey, hello, good evening, everyone. Yes, I am Rhea Gontalilib. So I am totally blind. I am a certified accessibility professional and a certified UX professional as well. So actually, I am a software engineer by profession, but because of my condition, because of all the inaccessibility issues that I have encountered along my career journey, and of course, being a member of the community, of the blind community, I decided to make digital accessibility my advocacy. So I'm actively doing consultancy job related to accessibility. So while I do help, I make consultancy job related to accessibility in terms of web, mobile, documents. So actually everything related to digital accessibility. And I have been practicing in this field for almost a decade already. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here this afternoon and share my insights on our topic today. So yeah.
All right. Okay. So, why are we talking about form accessibility? So, we know that a lot of the services have shifted from from uh, manual or face to face interaction. A lot of the things have shifted to the online platform, especially since the pandemic. And so not just the government services and information, a lot of private businesses have also shifted and explored different possibilities for the on the online platform. And so uh, part of this is the use of forms. And we know that forms is an essential gateway to different services and information. We have from simple use as signing up for a newsletter or purchasing goods and services online, enrolling in schools, sending your payment to different billing companies. And so forms are a crucial part of our experience on the web. But it tends also to provide a big challenge for a lot of people, um, because of the challenges that it provides. For example, for people with disabilities um, who are not able to um, do the same the typical way of surfing or browsing the internet. So these barriers can provide frustrations, even stop people from being able to accomplish these forms, and it could mean a lot. Could mean night and day for someone. Maybe it could be a major a um, minor barrier for some people, but for others it can mean that you're not able to avail the service. So maybe Rhea also has some insights about form accessibility. Why we're discussing it at this meeting.
Okay. I think before we proceed to the rest of the presentation, I would like to, well, I always say this whenever I present about accessibility. So I think just to put things into perspective, when we say accessibility, so even with form accessibility, it's not just about, being able to open the link, go to the form, and that's it. That's accessible. Well, in essence, if we'll just look at it that way, we can say that the form is accessible, but in the disability perspective, when we say quote unquote accessible, it means that persons like me who uses assistive tools, assistive technologies, we are able to fill out the forms independently without any barriers and complete the action, yeah, independently. So yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah. So there are also some legal and ethical considerations for making forms accessible. We have a lot of different countries actually have legal have laws, different laws that mandate web accessibility. For example, in the U.S., in Europe, in Canada, Australia, the U.K., India. So they have laws that specifically pertain to web accessibility, and going against these laws can mean fines, jail time, even jail time. In Ireland, that's one of the particular countries that actually um, um, also have jail time as punishment for inaccessibility of your web assets. So this legal problems can be um, can add a lot of burden to you and to your business. It can damage your reputation, and of course, that's a lot of expenses. Even if you settle, um, and at the same time, the court usually asks you to make the website accessible anyway. So it's important to be proactive and uh, be one step ahead of those legal requirements that we should make our websites accessible. So it's not just the website owners or the business owners. It's also up to us developers and designers. Actually, we can also be involved in these legal issues. Some cases in the U.S. also include the design firm who created the website, since they failed to deliver the required accessible platform that they promised to the state. So um, we are legally obliged to make the websites that we create accessible. So for ethical considerations, let's hear from Rhea.
Okay, so actually, beyond the legal considerations or beyond the compliance that Jerson has mentioned. Yeah, you can be sued, you can have jail time and all that. But of course, another aspect of it is the ethical or the moral obligations that designers and developers have to, comply in terms of making digital space accessible. But of course, I know that when we talk about ethical or moral standards, it could be very subjective. So I think it would all boil down to one thing. Well, I can point out several ethical considerations, moral considerations, but for me, I think it would all boil down to um, just incorporating accessibility in your processes. So make accessibility in general as part of your culture, meaning don't look at it as a bug that is to be fixed. It's definitely not an add-on, but um, ethical perspective means that at the very beginning of the development, or actually even in the design phase, even in the research phase, um, accessibility is encouraging us to, um, include it, actually put or include accessibility in the earliest or in the early stages of all our processes. And if we do that, yeah, we will not only comply with the legal matters which Gerson mentioned a while ago, but if we do that, we are ensured that our products, our digital products, will be accessible all the way. So, yeah.
And of course, we also have some business considerations. It's not just about being good-hearted or following legal requirements, but also accessibility has some good impact on businesses. For example, if a form is accessible and a lot of people can accomplish it, can fill it out, of course, it's going to have a higher conversion rate. So if it's a checkout form, if it's a payment form, you're definitely going to have less friction from your users, and they're gonna be able to submit the form with with minimal to no barriers, and of course that's gonna affect your bottom line to the for the better. Um, it also adds good reputation to your business. Um, the people with disability minority are very loyal customers, and if your platform or your website is accessible, word of mouth quickly um, the word of mouth quickly gets around that this website is accessible, it's easy to use, and it implies that they also support people with disabilities, and that adds to your to the business's good reputation, and it translates to better earnings, better revenue, and or whatever goal you have, for example, for your campaigns, it always translates to something positive. All right. So what can we expect from this session? First, we're going to show you an inaccessible form. Rhea is going to help us demonstrate what makes it inaccessible. How is her experience going through an inaccessible form, and then we're gonna also demo an accessible version of that form, and then we're gonna explain what changed and how you can make your forms also accessible. Okay. So before that, I'm just gonna enumerate quickly the basic form components. So we have labels. These are the text that tells you what to fill out in this specific field, and then the fields, of course, are um, the uh, the empty fields where you can type or you can select the items that is being asked in the form. We also have helper text. So these are additional text aside from the labels that adds more explanation on, for example, the format of the information for us. So if the form is if the field is asking for a phone number, a helper text can provide information on the format that that is accepted by the form. So if it's a date, it also tells you what the format of the date should look like when you enter it in the form. We also have groups. So uh, these are composed of different fields but are related. For example, um, um, an address field. It can be composed of different text fields, a combo box. You also have one of the most practical uses is by grouping radio buttons or check boxes. And then we also have action buttons. These are the buttons that you click to do something with the form. So you can submit it, you can reset the form, or you can go to the next page if it's a multi-step form. You can also save and continue later. So if it's a very lengthy form and you want to pause for a while, usually um, there's save and continue later form for buttons that are like that. We also have feedback, which provide us information um, on the status of the field or the form itself. So an example of this is an error message form, like when you submit a form and you have you missed a field that's required, or you entered information in the wrong format. So it can provide you with the correct way to correct the information that you entered. It can also tell you if the form was submitted successfully. All right, so this is a screenshot of um, a simple login form for GitHub. So as you can see, we have the username or email address label, and then we have the field here, and then the password, and then below that we have an error message saying incorrect username or password, and then we have two buttons, sign in and cancel. So I think the only thing that's missing here are groups and helper text. So we don't have any helper text over here, and none of these are grouped together. So this is a very simple form example. And what makes it accessible? Of course, if you have proper labels um, and not just depend on placeholders, you know, those fields where the label is supposedly inside of the field already, and it's the color contrast is very low. So those are usually implemented through using labels and through using placeholders, and then not using proper labels. Also, clear instructions should be very clear what kind of information is being asked. If it's full name, is it first name only? Is it last name only? So clear instructions. The one I mentioned earlier was the date or the phone number, what kind of format is required. Next one, can it be navigated by keyboard? You can easily test this by going on the page. Just tab on your keyboard, press the tab key on your keyboard. If you are able to see where you are on the form, that means that that form is navigable by keyboard, accessible by keyboard. Appropriate feedback if the error message is informative and tells you how to correct your error. So not just something like invalid entry. So it doesn't provide context to the user. Um, it should be something like the username, the name is required. Fill out your full name or something like that. And then enough color contrast. If someone with a low vision can't read the labels, then it's almost tantamount to not having labels. because if they're not able to read it, then how can they know what information you're asking for? We also have groupings to make sure that the context is provided to the user. And visible focus outline. This is related to the third item that I mentioned about being accessible by keyboard. So even if it's accessible by keyboard, if you can see a focus outline, it's basically the same thing as not being accessible by keyboard. And there's also autocomplete, which is a very helpful feature so that you spend less time filling out the form. For example, if you have some information already saved in your browser, your name, first name and last name, your email, your address, your phone number, adding the autocomplete attribute to your forms can really help speed up the process, really streamline the process of filling out the form. All right, so now we're going to demo the form with accessibility issues. I think Rhea is also going to share her screen so we can see how it looks from her perspective. We can also listen from her perspective. Screen reader.
Someone else is sharing. Someone else is sharing. You can request multiple set request button. Close button. Space. Zoom meeting. Muted. Currently unmuted. Hold button.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen.
Context layout options are shown. Select a window or an entire screen. Application. Maximum. Choose the layout. Grouping. Share sound selected. Select sharing. Share sound selected. Option. Space. Not checked. Space checked. Select sharing sound. Optimize for video. Select share sound selected. Option if you want other video sounds coming from your computer as well as see a share screen. Checkbox checked. Select optimize for video. Optimize for video. Share screen button. Enter. Inbox accessible form. National Chrome. Escape. Escape. Participants can now see your
Can you screen reader?
slower,
I'm gonna-
slower.
Press the speed so
Escape.
that
Faster.
Yeah, thank you for
So you
slowing it
guys
down for
can-
us.
okay. So the first thing that I'm gonna show you is actually this is an inaccessible form. So imagine the scenario is, say for example, I am trying to purchase a product and this is the checkout form. So okay, put in mind that even if I am blind, I'm speaking on behalf of the community. Please remember that most of us, we also have purchasing powers. Probably because, I don't know, majority of us, we have our own jobs as well. We earn our own money. So we are just like you, we are very much capable to make a purchase online. Okay. And well, to give context, the most conventional way for us to navigate a form is using the tab key. Okay, so let me start.
Edit required as pop-up blank. Type in text.
Okay, so this is the first field. So I don't know if you heard it says required pop up. So at this point, I know that this field is required, but I have no idea what to input. I don't have any idea because the field label is not announced. Okay, so let's say I am a persistent buyer. So I'll move to the next field.
Combo box required. Alabama. To change the selection, use the arrow keys.
It just says combo box. Again, it says required. But since I heard the first option, which is Alabama, so I'm assuming this is the state. Okay, so let's see. I'll just
Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California.
say I'll select California.
Enter expanded required. List required with 5 items. California. To move to an item, press the arrow keys.
Okay. So at this point, the only field that I have entered a value is the state field.
Inaccessible form. State star combo box required. California.
So okay, it says state.
To change the selection, press upper.
Field. If you notice, again, the field name is not announced. So for a person who is blind like me, I have no idea what to input. But this time, I know that this is a radio button. Okay, so maybe if I move around the options, I'd have an idea what these radio buttons are. So let's see. Now I'm pressing the arrow keys. It's not announcing anything.
To change the selection, press up or down arrow. Radio button not checked. 2 of 3.
It just says not checked. Again, I'm pressing the arrow keys, nothing is happening. Okay, wild guess. Let's say I want to select this option. By the way, to select either a radio button or a checkbox when you're using a screen reader, to do that, we're gonna use the space bar. So I'm gonna press space. So again, it just says space. So the expectation is, since this is a radio button, supposedly it would tell me that, this option is selected. Let's see.
Radio button not checked.
Again,
2
it
of 3.
says it's not checked, so I don't know if it's visually, if it's selected. So, okay, still I'll proceed, hoping that, in the next form fields, I'd be able to fill out something that would make sense.
To change the selection, press up or down arrow. Radio button not checked. 3 of 3.
This is the third radio button.
Axe not checked.
So
To
this
check,
time,
press
I know
space
this
bar.
is a different field because it's already a checkbox. So it says add on one. So at least I know that this is a first, this is an add-on.
Add dash on 1
So it's not
checkbox not
checked.
checked. Add
Again,
dash on
the
2
add-on
checkbox
is
not
not
checked.
checked.
To check, press space bar. Add dash on 3.
There.
Submit payment.
Now I use the down arrow.
Slower. Slower. Add dash
It
submit payment.
says submit payment.
Add dash on 3 submit
It
payment.
just But there are so many errors. So of course, since I'm not able to read them, the next best thing to do for me is to, hopefully to browse the errors using the arrow keys. Okay, now I'm using the up and down arrow keys. It's not reading anything. So this is what you call a keyboard trap. The only control that I
OK
can
button.
activate is the OK button.
Enter inaccessible
So-
form dash 2.
With this kind of experience, even if I'm very much capable to purchase a product, chances are I'm not gonna continue. I'm not gonna waste my time figuring out how to proceed with checking out the product. So with this scenario, I'm already a lost customer.
Title is inaccessible form dash 2.
So shall I proceed with the accessible form, Jerson, or want to share your
Close document
insights
window.
first?
Title is mainly
Let's.
level 2. Settings example.
I know you already mentioned some of the things that make it inaccessible, but we can probably summarize it.
Yeah. So the most obvious reasons why it's not accessible is impossible for me to accomplish the form because, to begin with, I don't know what to input. Then another one is, if you notice in the radio buttons and in the checkbox elements a while ago, the state is not conveyed. So I'm not sure whether I'm able to, it's not conveyed as an interactive element. So there are actually several factors why a form can be considered as not accessible, but those that I showed you or those that I mentioned are the most common pain points that blind persons like me
Start screen share.
encounter
Example 2.
when we fill
Screen
out
share.
forms. Sorry. So yeah.
Link.
Switchers on.
So I just shared the slide that lists down the things that make the form inaccessible. Yeah. So as Rhea mentioned, we have labels not properly added. There's also no feedback on the state of selection of the radio buttons. I think also the add-ons, and some items are not accessible by keyboard. Even the selecting the state of the checkbox or of the radio button, it was not possible by using keyboard only. So that's a huge barrier right there. If you also notice, hold on, I think I should also share that from my screen. You can see in the street address and city fields. So aside from not having a label, we're using just the placeholder. And the placeholder, for one thing, is it doesn't have enough color contrast. It's usually faded. So that could mean some issues with people who have low vision and are not able to easily read the labels or the placeholder in the field. There's no visible focus outline. So some screen readers add their own focus outline, but for users who don't use screen readers but use keyboard to navigate, there is no visible focus outline here. Okay, in the checkbox and the radio button, there is a red outline. And the submit button is also not accessible by keyboard. So if you don't use any screen reader and there's nothing that compensates for this inaccessibility, you wouldn't be able to submit this form. Rhea was able to submit it because her screen reader was able to go through the individual elements, and that's the only reason that she was able to access this submit button. No autocomplete on common fields. So this isn't a huge barrier, but this can mean a lot of help for when the user has their information already saved in their browser. So this can significantly shorten the time to fill out to accomplish a form such as the one that that we showed you earlier. So I'm also going to show you an kind of an equivalent of how the experience is for Rhea. But this time it's for us people who are sighted, who can see the screen. So this is how the experience is like. As you can see on the screen, we have several fields, but they don't have any labels. So you're left guessing what information to add to them. Also, you can see the radio buttons are just circles, and they don't have any text associated with them. The submit payment button is similar to the other demo. The color contrast between the text, the submit payment text, and the color of the button is very low. It's white on light blue, so it's very hard to read. So this is if you encounter a form like this, how would you even interact with a form like this? Can anyone tell in the comments what would be your reaction or next course of action when you see a checkout form like this one? What would you do? Would you still or we just abandon the form.
From Philippine inbox to everyone, gold leave,
So click X on leave, yeah. So this isn't a very pleasant experience. So imagine someone with a disability always encountering stuff like this on a daily basis. So it's something of a wake up call to us designers and developers to improve the quality of our work, make our forms accessible, so that people like Rhea don't experience this frustrating form. All right, now we can go through the accessible version of the form. I'm gonna stop.
I can press 0. Think Dash Google Chrome. Zoom Workplace. JAWS Professional versus Example 2 Dash Google Chrome. Example 2 Dash Gmail. Example 2.
Can you still see my screen?
No.
Alt S. Zoom meeting to move to I can press the arrow keys. Alt S. Layouts and options are shown. Screen tab. Entire screen.
Yes, but the browser is very small.
Slower.
It's not maximized.
Slower.
Again, I adjusted the speed of my screen reader.
Exam.
Okay.
SOM. Address groups.
Address
Email address group. Street address edit.
says street,
36 STREET. City edit required.
says city,
THERG required. City edit required tagging. State combo box
State, so
required.
let's pick one.
Alaska, Arizona. Enter expanded required. Example 2. Address. State combo box required Arizona. To change the selection, press up or down arrow. Payment option group. Cash radio button
Okay,
not
so
checked.
the radio buttons that I cannot identify a while ago, apparently they are payment options. So now let's see.
Credit card
Credit card.
radio button.
PayPal,
PayPal radio.
cash.
Cash radio. PayPal radio button checked.
So at
Three
this
of three.
point, actually, even without activating the space bar, it already conveyed that this one is selected. So I selected PayPal.
Cash PayPal
Now let's
radio
move to the
button checked.
add-ons.
Select add dash ons group. Add dash on 1 checkbox not checked. Add dash on 2 checkbox not checked.
So
Space check.
add-on 2, it says check. So I'm very, very sure that I was able to select the add-on number 2.
Add dash on
And
3.
this time, when
Submit
I
payment.
tabbed after the add-on control, I was able to immediately hear the submit, and it says submit button. So right then and there, I know that this element is interactive. So let me press the enter.
Enter. Form has been submitted.
Okay, so it says form has been submitted. So just imagine if this is a checkout form, it's very, very easy for me to make a purchase. Maybe most of you would say, well, you're just part of the minority. You're just 15% of the population. So why would I bother? Actually, the business perspective, sometimes it's not about how many customers would visit your website or how many customers would buy your product. But of course, in the business perspective, that matters, but I think it equally matters, the returning customers. So say for example, I visited a e-commerce site wherein I was able to, easily make a purchase. So I'll keep on coming back. Whenever I want to purchase something, I'm gonna come back. So I will be a returning customer over and over and over again. So well, if we look at it in the business perspective, so that's making money. So yeah, that's an example of an accessible form for me.
All right. Thanks, Rhea.
Close document.
Okay.
Start screen share. Thank you, Google Chrome. Your screen share is
All
stopped.
right. So comparing the inaccessible version and the accessible version, here are the things that changed. So now there's enough color contrast between, for example, the button. I'm gonna. So from here, you'll see the. Let's use the example of the button. White text on light blue is now white text on dark blue. So it's a lot more visible. We can easily read the text on the button. We also use semantic HTML. So the reason why the submit payment button is not keyboard accessible is because I used a div. We may get a bit technical, just a little bit, as we go through the code. Gonna increase the size so that you can see it better. So a lot of web developers and software developers use this strategy. I don't know if it can actually be called strategy, but they use this very generic container, the div element, to make it look and work like something else. So for in this case, a button. It's very common for some maybe plugin developers, web developers, to use a div element uh, as a button or as another element. So I don't know if they know or if they just don't care that there's already an element for that specific element. So in this case, I used a button. You can also use an input field with the type of button or submit rather. So by using the semantic HTML for the appropriate element, you're making the form accessible with as little effort as possible. Because when you use a div, like in this example, to make it work like a button, you'll have to add a bunch of JavaScript to make this just be clickable or be activated by the space bar. So, but when you use a button element, those accessibility features are already built in. So you don't have to code anything. Another thing is associating labels with their corresponding fields. So in this first example, you can see that this has a label, right? But this is not, even if it appears that there's a label, this is not programmatically related. It's visually related since it's very close to the field, but the full name label is not programmatically related to the field. So we can check in the code. It says label, then full name, and then the closing label field label tag, and then the input is right there. So there's no programmatic connection between the two. And the way to connect them programmatically is by using the for attribute. So in this case, label, and then I use for equals full name. So this full name is the ID of this field. I'm gonna remove my okay, so the input field has an ID of full name, and that's what I add as the value of the for attribute. So that's simply it. You just use the for attribute and then reference the ID of the input field. And the quickest way to see if it's implemented properly if you click on the label, it should activate the field. So I click here and you see that the field is focused. Providing the necessary instructions. It was not mentioned, but one of the examples I can use for that, actually just displaying the required text, or you can also actually use asterisk or star, but you have to convey that this means that it's required. Generally, it is sort of like a convention that adding star on the field name makes it automatically required, understandably. But if it's a long form, it's generally better if you say that fields marked with an asterisk are required. So that makes it even clearer for the user. Imagine if it's someone like your parents who don't always use a computer and they don't know what it means. So it's always better to have a legend or extra information on what this is about, what the asterisk is about. And using the actual text required, make it really clear that this field is required. Also, when it comes to, I don't have an example here showing the asking for the format of a field, but you can just it's easy to imagine how that would what that would go. I apologize for not having an example of that here. I think a phone number would have been a great example here. But anyway, one other use case for that is using the error messages as the sort of additional instruction for correcting the error of the user. So in this case, when I press the submit button, it immediately notified me of the fields that are problematic, that are required. So in this first one, it says enter your full name. So it's telling me how I can correct this error. So by entering the full name. And it's the same for the other fields. Actually, I'd like to I hope Rhea doesn't mind if I share this on my end. I'm gonna repeat sharing and then share sound. I'm gonna turn on my screen reader.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Accessible form. Google Chrome. Window. Accessible form. Web con. 5 errors found in the form. Enter your full name. Enter your valid email address. Enter your street address. Enter.
Yeah. Just an example of how some forms actually don't implement this. Like when you submit a form, and for screen reader users, they usually don't. They're usually not informed on what's wrong if there's an error. Some forms don't tell them where the error is or how to correct it. So in this case, when I submit the form, it immediately tells me how many how many items are there that are problematic, and it lists down every single error, and then I can
5 errors found in the form. Enter your full name. Enter your
go through it,
link. Enter your full name. List
and then when I press enter, it immediately brings me to the field that has an invalid value.
full name. Enter your full name. Required invalid data. Edit text. Voiceover off.
And then grouping related fields together. So the way to do that, an example of that in the first form, ideally this 3 radio buttons should be grouped together because these are actually input fields, each one. And in Rhea's demonstration earlier, it didn't announce what each input what each radio button is supposed to be, and also it didn't mention the label. In this example, we're using the field set element. So the field set tag is used to group related form fields together. So in this case, these radio buttons are grouped using the field set HTML tag. And then for the label, you use legend. So instead of the label, you use legend inside the field set. The label is used here. And as I've shown earlier, we also use the for attribute and then point that to the ID of the associated input field. All right. Was that confusing or too technical? So I think for developers, you're already familiar with the div element that we use to put things in a box, put things in these containers. So for forms, we use a field set for that to group the related form fields together. Another example is this address field. So we have 3 different fields. This is a text field, another text field, and this is a combo box. And the way to associate them together is by wrapping them in a field set element and then using the legend element to label it as the address. All right. And then ensuring keyboard accessibility. Actually, when creating a form, you don't really need to do anything. I mean, by default, if you're using semantic HTML, it's going to be accessible. It's going to be keyboard accessible. I mean, these are just the default focus outline that you can see. But in this example, in our inaccessible example, there is no focus outline because it has been removed deliberately. I'm going to inspect it again. And then I'm going to change the status of the input field to focus. And you can see here that the outline has been set to 0 if the input, the text area, or the select fields are in focus. So I'm embarrassed to admit this, but a long time ago, when I didn't know anything about accessibility, I used to remove this. I used to do this too, outline 0 when these fields are in focus, because I thought they were ugly. They didn't go along with the design that the designer has created, and then I didn't know what it was supposed to be for. So that's a very common thing that designers do even nowadays. I mean, I used to do that, I think, 10 years ago. But nowadays, a lot of designers still do that. A lot of page building software still implement that actually when they're supposed to be the ones to um, actually encourage users to not touch this part, the focus outline. um so yeah, it's very common, and it's unfortunate thing that this is still happening. But I mean, it's a very simple thing. Actually, we don't need to do anything at all. So by default, form fields, the interactive fields are accessible and has its own focus outline even without screen readers. I mean, screen readers add their own focus outline just to compensate for what designers are doing to mess up with us with a focus outline. So even without the assistance of those screen readers, if you use semantic HTML, these fields are already focusable, and you can see the focus outline right here. Adding autocomplete. So unfortunately, I don't have any information saved in my browser, like my full name, email address, phone number, and physical address. But if it's saved in the browser, I made the full name, email, I think address is also set to autocomplete, and the way to do that is by using the autocomplete attribute. So when I inspect it, you can see there's an autocomplete attribute here, and then the value is name. For the email, the autocomplete is set to email. Street address, the autocomplete value is set to street dash address. And then city, there is no autocomplete for city. Or maybe, I don't know if I just missed this one. But if you'd like to learn more about the different saved information that you can use as in the autocomplete, you can learn more about that here. I'm referencing the MDN web docs from Mozilla. I'm going to paste this link in the chat. So you can learn more about that here. You can turn it off or on. You can set, basically, if you have an e-commerce website and you use this, it's gonna matter a lot because it's going to auto-save those information that usually take a while to enter, such as the address. And then adding helpful error messages like the ones that I showed you earlier. And then adding feedback on successful navigation as what Rhea also showed earlier in our demonstration. So I actually used a bunch of JavaScript to achieve that, to display the form submitted successfully message. But it can be as simple as redirecting to a new page. If you don't want to write JavaScript, you can simply redirect the form to a new page and have maybe a title or the first paragraph there to say that the form has been submitted successfully, and it's going to convey that message clearly to the user. All right. So I think that's all that changed. I think I should also actually mention the additional ARIA attributes that are added to the fields to make it more accessible. So ARIA are attributes that you add to the to the HTML tags to make them more accessible. So you can find more information about that here. Also on the MDN web docs that I shared, I'm also going to paste the link of that here. So as I said, HTML fields by default are usually HTML elements are usually accessible by default. You don't need to add extra JavaScript to make it accessible. But in some cases, there are accessibility features that can be added to enhance the accessibility of an element, and that's by using the ARIA attribute. So there's a bunch of ARIA attributes that you can actually add, and it's completely different topic altogether that we can probably discuss at some point. But for now, this is just a really quick overview. So some of the ARIA attributes that I added to these fields. This is the inaccessible form. Okay, so let's check this one. ARIA described by. So I'm referencing the name dash error ID. This is that specific text element. So you can see here, this is where I output the error message for each paragraph. So there's one under each field, an error message, and then the ID name dash error, and that's what I use in the ARIA described by attribute. So when a screen reader, excuse me, so when a screen reader goes through, nag-freeze daw yung screen. Can you tell me what's going on? What can you see on my screen?
Sir, just the Google Docs.
Hold on. I'll try sharing again.
Yeah, we can see it now, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so you can see in this input, I added the ARIA described by, and then reference the ID of the element where I'm outputting the error message. So when the screen reader goes to this field, it's going to say the label first, full name required, and then it's going to announce the value of this text field, of this text element. Actually, we can probably demo right now.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Accessible form. Google link. Select full name. Enter your full name. Required invalid data. Edit text. Main. You are currently on a text field. To enter text in this field.
Okay, so it mentioned the full name required and then enter your full name. And then it also said invalid data.
VoiceOver off.
So that invalid data that it mentioned is because there's an ARIA invalid attribute and then it's set to true. So when a field receives an invalid data and you send submit, you should output the ARIA invalid equals true, so that it's conveyed also to screen readers. So if it's not specified using the ARIA invalid, I think it's going to depend probably just on the error message that you output here. If there's no dependable error message, then the user is not gonna understand right away that this is an invalid field and that it should be corrected. So we have ARIA described by and ARIA invalid. I think those are the two that I used mostly on these fields. If you use a helper text, you can also add that to the ARIA described by. So for example, let's do that here. if I add a paragraph here, um, name helper. Last name, first name, middle initial. So say something like this. So this is the helper text, and I should also edit this. So Arya described by, and then name dash helper. There. So that's how you also reference the helper text in your input field by adding adding the ID in the area described by. Um, what else? I think one of the most popular ARIA attributes that you probably encountered is the ARIA label. And a less popular one is the ARIA labeled by. But I didn't have any use case in this form. I'm going to share the first rule of ARIA. So the first rule of ARIA is to not use any ARIA, because ARIA is only used when it's actually needed. So adding a bad ARIA is worse than not having any ARIA attributes at all. So if you don't know how to use it, might as well not use it. But anyway, it's really easy to learn. The resources are available online, so it's easy to learn and implement this. But if you do it excessively, like you add a bunch of ARIA attributes for your fields and it's not necessary, it's going to make the experience worse for users. So if you're not able to add, to change or to add a label, the next best thing is to use an ARIA label. So if you're not able to add this one, such as if your client and the designer actually insist on using a placeholder, and you've done all you can to convince them, but they're still adamant on just using placeholder, the next best thing is to use an ARIA label attribute on the field. The ARIA label goes something like this. So just add ARIA. Oh, sorry. Just add ARIA dash label equals, and then type the label here. So full name. Okay. So if there's an ARIA label in this field, it's not going to read this. It's going to read what's in the ARIA label. So if it says here full name required, and it says here, let's say I use complete name instead in the ARIA label, it's not going to say full name required. It's going to say full name, complete name. And another drawback of using an ARIA label like this is that it's not translatable. So unless you do something a bit more dynamic, but using it like this, it's not translatable. There. I think that's all for the technical changes, technical updates in the code. If you have questions, feel free to enter them in the chat. And I'm going to switch to the slides. Okay, I think we're done. For final thoughts, as a developer, as designers, as developers, I think it's our ethical obligation to make not just forms, but the entire website to be accessible as much as possible. And it's not just an ethical or a legal obligation. It's actually a reflection of the quality of our work. So if you're a good designer, if you're a good developer, it will reflect to the quality of your work. If it's accessible, then it shows that you are um, a good designer, a good developer that really takes into consideration uh, as much aspect as possible. So not just typical users, but you're also considering people with disabilities, people with different abilities who may use your form, people who browse websites differently than what you're used to, people who use different devices, not the typical computer with a keyboard and a mouse. So taking into consideration those things, it shows that you are um, a designer or a developer that really considers a lot of different factors that can affect your users' experience. So that's what I'm gonna leave each and every one of you. And I think Rhea also has some thoughts to share on um, on our topic for today. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. So I think you're on mute.
Audio now muted.
Yeah.
All right.
Audio set. Music currently muted. Hold play button.
Yeah, for me, I think Jerson already covered majority of it, especially on the legal and on the technical aspect of accessibility. Well, for me, as someone who is directly impacted or directly benefits from accessibility, I can say that accessibility is more than just the compliance. If you practice accessibility, you're not just complying with rules, you're actually changing lives because accessibility for us is equal to empowerment. Because, like for me, since digital products these days are accessible, I can be able to participate independently in the digital space. So, this fosters independence for persons with disabilities like me. Okay, thank you.
Audio settings button.
All right.
Music currently muted.
So guys, it's your turn to ask questions. If you have any questions or feedback or takeaways that you'd like to share, feel free to unmute and speak up or type your comments or questions in the comment section. Going through some of the comments from earlier. Yeah, from Dennis. Especially in React.js, dami ko nakikita na div gamit nila for button. Yeah. So I'm actually very confused about that. So when I was first exploring development, I thought
Music currently muted.
um, I actually placed these programmers in high regard because they're years ahead of me in terms of doing this. But when I learned about accessibility, I realized that a lot of these really talented developers are failing in just the most basic way, because they're not using semantic HTML. And I think that I don't want to sound judgmental, but when I look at code, like when I use a plugin or anything, and I look at the code and I see that it doesn't use semantic HTML, I'm somewhat uh, cautious of using or using the plugin, because I think that um, they're not as good as I had hoped, because they're not following the uh, very basic use of HTML. These are the building blocks of the web, and if you're deliberately ignoring it, or going through um, gymnastics just to achieve something that's already available right there, like you're reinventing the wheel and failing to do it properly, then it's going to reflect on your on your quality, on the quality of your work. Yeah. So I unfortunately I also see this in a lot of programmers using div, the ever popular div. From Philip, I have to drop off now. Yeah. All right. In case you're watching this again in a replay, thanks Philip for joining us. He says, thank you, Jerson and Rhea, for an insightful session from both perspectives. Very useful. Would like to explore how on-off group can support web accessibility PH in some way. I will be in touch. I will get in touch. Thanks, Philip.